Hey everyone, it's your favorite worker of love. And yeah, today I want to talk about the book that changed my life. Um and it's this one right here, Works of Love by Soren Kierkegaard. And uh yeah, man, and you can tell it's mine because it's all ripped up by my cerebral palsy. These are your books on cerebral palsy, man. But I don't care because I like physical books. um, but yeah, and why did it change my life? Well, um, honestly, I had started reading Kierkegaard in like the summer of 2016 when I was like 17, almost 18, and his first book of his that I read was Fear and Trembling, which he wrote under the pseudonym Johannes de Silencio. And it was my first introduction to like Christian existentialism, and I thought that the way he framed the problem of Abraham uh and Isaac was absolutely brilliant, the problemata and all of that stuff. Um and I loved it. He quickly became one of my favorite philosophers after that. And about a year later, and I still remember the day, man. Me and my mom were out. I forget if we went to buy clothes at Burlington or if she was just taking me to the mall. And, as I usually did, um, I begged her to take me to the philosophy section in our local Barnes and Nobles in our, uh, at that point, slowly decaying mall. Um, and yeah, the philosophy section was kind of small, obviously. There were a few Nietzsche texts, there were a few Sartre texts, but among all the other stuff, there was this book right here, Works of Love. And, I was intrigued by it. I was like, what's this? Yeah, I know it's Kierkegaard, and I liked, um, Fear and Trembling, and so I took a risk on it, man. I took a risk on it, man, and like I was not disappointed. Um I started reading it in the car that day in like May or June 2017, and you guys have to realize that at this point I was still very much in like my Inkwell alt light pipeline days, man. I got sucked into it. I've talked about that briefly uh on this channel, and a few weeks before my brother had a talk with me about my feelings on those topics, my far right views at that point, or I would say like borderline views at that point. And it really got me thinking. It really did. And Works of Love was the book that finally got me to say like, I need to change. I've been wrong up to this point. It saved me from going down the path that so many modern men, regardless of race or or religion go down through YouTube and stuff like that, because I didn't have anyone. I was going through my angsty teenager phase still at this point. I was 18 going on 19, and Works of Love is primarily about, and it's not even written under any of Kierkegaard's pseudonyms, which is another thing that I really caught my eye. But it's about more than Kierkegaard's other works, because I would argue that all of his works are about this, but Works of Love is about how um to love your neighbor as yourself. You know, the greatest, well, in some gospels just the greatest commandments, and in others a corollary to the greatest commandment, which is the Shema. You know, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul. um and you're sitting there thinking, weren't you an atheist at this point? Yes, and I still am, but at the same time, like, culturally, guys, I'm still very much a Christian. It still informs a lot of my um moral beliefs, and you know, cultural ones too, cuz I'm Latino, man. Like, you can't really escape it. Uh anyway, so I started reading it, and you know, I started to realize, guys, that, like, the guy that Kierkegaard talks about as the unloving person, or he doesn't really mention the unloving person that much. He mentions the lover, the one that practices, you know, love to his neighbor as himself. Um, I realized that I was the opposite of that guy in almost every circumstance. And especially what he says about jealousy, and how it's not really love because all it does is take, you know, an object and focuses its love directly and solely on one object instead of, like, your neighbor, which he makes it clear that um neighbor is anyone you meet. You're obligated to love them as yourself. And this is one of those cases where I think the English translations don't do enough justice in clarifying that idea, because at least in North American English, neighbor has like a very distinct connotation of, like, oh, someone you live next to, but literally, and he says this, it's in the, excuse me, book itself, it's literally someone near your burrow, or in other words, someone you live next to. But I actually like the Latin and Spanish translations of neighbor, which in Latin it's proximus, and in Spanish it's prójimo, which, you know, come from, or at least in vulgar Latin, means the person next to you, for, you know, proximo and stuff like that. Or again, proximus. So I think it's clearer in the Latin, but yeah, and I realized, guys, again, the book indicted me for not being loving in a Christian way, in an agapic way. Um and you know, as I kept reading and reading over the summer, and as I finished it, um like, I was fully convicted and convinced that I needed to change the way I thought about especially women. I realized that I wasn't treating them as neighbors at all, and that I was kind of like the man that only looked at them to lust after them in his heart. Um but it was again really not because I disliked women or really had a problem with women. It's just that for men and boys, it is on they always have been the easiest scapegoat for their problems, unfortunately. And you know, I can't say that I was any different. Um and it led me down, the skeptic to alt light pipeline, like Sargon of Akkad and like Armored Skeptic and Gamergate and stuff like that. And I don't know, man. It was the final nail in the coffin. And like the rest of that summer into the later portions of that year were just filled with a tremendous amount of guilt for me, because I started going over every way in which I had interacted with people, and again, especially women, and like I just felt so bad about it. And I can't even begin to describe to you the guilt that I felt. I felt it literally so deep in my body. Um there's a tingling sensation that comes with love, like true love, like agapic love, like Christian love, not romantic or even friendship. And um I can say the same thing about the feeling that comes with guilt as well, although one of them is extremely joyful and the other one is extremely painful, and I felt that. And to be honest, I still um struggle with it. Of course, no one is perfect in love except one person, Yeshua ben Yosef, as we know. To, who was really the only true Christian and the only true manifestation of godly love, at least here in the West. And so, but eventually, even after I kept making mistakes into 2018 and 2019, I fully deprogrammed myself from the YouTube alt light pipeline, thankfully. And it was thanks not only to my brother, but to this book and to its the way it showed me not only what true love, unconditional love was, but how to practice it, and how it exposed my own shortcomings in that area, and there were a lot. Because I wasn't a loving person. I just wasn't. And yeah, you can sort of understand it because I was a teenager, but there still isn't any excuse for it. There just isn't. And, I still fail. Of course I do. And I make mistakes. But I always try my hardest to give my love unconditionally to people. And there's not much I can do for people physically. So I feel like it's the least that I could do for others. And I do consider everyone my neighbor, the person next to me, my prójimo, my proximus. I really do um on an individual level. I have a harder time on a like a group level and a systemic level. That's where I have my doubts, and that's where I struggle with most. But yeah, guys, what can I say? And I'll make another video about this, but just keep fighting the flesh, keep loving each other as friends and neighbors, and mortify the deeds of the body. uh Thank you very much for listening to me ramble on about one of my favorite books. Bye.